happy and sad. He's done it all. Chris Myers joins us. He's got a new book out. The book is called That Deserves a Wow. Of course, Chris, one of your famous catchphrases. Thank you so much for the time. Congrats on the book. How are you?
I'm good. Good morning to you guys. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Chris, I told Maggie a story yesterday. You will not remember this, but I met you for the first time when I was part of the Dan Patrick Show crew in 2009. We were at a Super
Bowl party.
Super Bowl party, yes. Okay, so you do remember. Except you were on the inside of the velvet rope, and I was on the outside of the velvet rope. And me and the Danettes, who are not famous yet, me and Paulie and Seaton walk up, and you were having a nice conversation. Like, oh, great to see you. How you guys doing? How's the family? And then like, Chris, can you help us get in? And you're like, I have a lot of pull here, but not that much pull. And then you turn around.
So I didn't get you guys in?
I
The jaws of life couldn't have gotten them in, Chris.
But when we asked you to let us in, you almost like laughed to yourself and said, "Boys, I love you, but I'm not all powerful here."
I think ultimately you got in though.
We did.
Okay.
We had a very good time. We hung out. Yeah. No, you were very friendly. But I can't believe you remember. It was Miami. I had to look it up. It was a great time.
Right.
Yeah.
My hometown. I should have had more pull there, but I've been away for a while. So.
You know what, Chris, you mentioned your hometown a lot and your connections to Florida in this book. That deserves a wow. And one thing that stood out to me, and I didn't know this about you, that you actually did a little stand-up comedy when you were in Florida. Did you have a joke? Like, what was your go-to, this one's going to bring the house down joke?
Well, I talked, a lot of the things that I talked about then were growing up in a mixed neighborhood, growing up Catholic, the differences there. It was the comic strip in Fort Lauderdale and later in New Orleans at the Faux Pas Comedy Club. Actually, when I was doing local sports there, I just kind of did that on the side. But it's funny, I don't really remember. Some of it was based on coming from a big family and that type of thing. So it was that kind of humor. Obviously, a lot of it didn't work. I might still be doing it, but I did love the interaction with the live audience. And having a sense of humor, obviously, is something that I think is important to whatever you do.
You know, Chris, one thing that's always impressed me about SportsCenter and ESPN, that you guys wrote your own show, that you and Dan and everybody, maybe that kind of thing trained you for that. Like, how hard was that to actually, back in the day, sort of do your own script on the fly? That seems impossible to me.
Yeah, it was a great atmosphere. Well, we had help from people behind the scenes. Hire young people out of college who would, do highlight shot sheets. So a lot of the shows were highlights. We'd write lead-ins based on what, we made it seem current. Like this was the setup coming in. And even if we knew the game was over, they'd run in, give us a shot sheet and give us the basic shots. And then we'd have to ad lib on the fly. But the writing, it was a great atmosphere there in the center. At least we used to, back in the 90s, the growth years of ESPN. And we would, sit there and watch the games and write and talk and interact and yell at, if you represented a team or that you were a fan of that team. And that was kind of fun. So it created, you kind of connected with the audience, I think. So in a sense, it was easy writing. That's actually what led, when Dan and I got the call from Bill Murray to come down to New York for the ESPYs. That was kind of the connection there. It was because there were a bunch of writers, comedy writers in the room working on the ESPYs. And Bill Murray was, no thanks, guys. We don't need you for this. Dan and Chris write their own material. We'll have them join us, and that's kind of how that began. And Bill had a funny segment on the ESPYs with SportsCenter. It was, I think, the second actual ESPYs that happened.
And that's an incredible story because Bill Murray just means so much to all of us. I know how much he means to you. He writes the foreword in your book, That Deserves a Wow, which you can buy now. Perloff and I had a question about Bill Murray because he's so reclusive at times. Yes. How do you find Bill Murray? Even if you know him or you meet him, do you have his personal number? Like, how do you get to Bill?
Yeah, Maggie, he just you get it. You get the number, but if he either calls you back or he doesn't. And now they use a voicemail. There used to not be a voicemail, but even his own family, that's the others I got along with him. He comes from a big family, so do I. I met all his brothers. We hang out in golf tournaments and things like that. And he shows up, but he is reliable. If he says he'll be there to do something, whether it was an up close interview or eventually write the forward or do a radio hit or something, he eventually, you just like, Bill, are you coming? Are you sure we need to set that? Don't worry. No, I said I'll do it. And all of a sudden he's there through a side door or a parachute or something like he arrives on the Letterman show. That's how it feels. But he is a lot of fun. But I also, there's some funny stories in there, and not invading anyone's privacy here, but there's also a sensitive side of him. He's an astute sports fan. He could almost be an analyst for golf or baseball and call out a game. But there's a caring side of him that was beneficial to me through the years, and actually gave me some good advice on the O.J. Simpson interview, the famous interview with Todd. Todd from the Danettes, who was part of booking that first live interview. So it's a unique friendship, one I would have never saw coming when it started out. However, he's the kind of guy you would want to hang out with, even if he wasn't famous in movies or entertainment.
Wait, Chris, what is the advice that Bill Murray gave you before you sat down for that famous interview with O.J. Simpson after O.J. had been acquitted?
Well, there were two pieces of advice. One was some people thought we shouldn't do it because people were upset. They thought we were going to be glorifying a killer. And to me, I was a little wavering. I mean, even O.J. Simpson's lawyer, one that defended him, told me ahead of time when he heard I was doing it. I ran into him somewhere out in Southern California, and he said, "You know what? Don't everything." So you defended him. He said, "Well, anything attached to him is negative. I wouldn't do it." So people thought it might hurt the career, but I just thought that we could ask the questions. It was important. We could ask if he had taken the stand, and we have him live, and so we had it. But Bill said, so I was talking to him, and he said, "No, you got to do it." And John Walsh, our editor at ESPN, backed us on this, but Bill's like, "You go for it." And then the other thing is, as I was preparing in a limited amount of time, talking to lawyers and police detectives and looking, I saw evidence, photos that even the jury didn't get to see in the initial murder trial. Again, OJ turned the interview down with Barbara Walters because she would only tape it. He didn't want somebody editing it because he thought it might make him look guilty or more guilty. So it had to be live. So with a live interview, people thought he would spin his stories and make you look stupid. And so Bill said, and I was a little concerned about that. Bill said there's a book called, and I think I got the title right, it's called How to Speak to Your Children So They'll Listen to You, and How to Listen So Your Children Will Speak to You, something like that. And that was so that there's an understanding of the way, because his speech, he thought OJ would do those types of lies, I guess, or denial. And it was very helpful, actually, in a very pedestrian, elementary kind of way for me in that live interview.
Chris, I couldn't put the book down. I love the stories. To me, the tough interviews are interesting. The Mike Tyson interview, where Tyson gets very angry at you because you were showing him Sports Illustrated covers where he lost fights. Has there ever been an interview where you were scared or nervous, or like, oh man, I'm going down a road that could lead to bad places?
Well, not really. I mean, there were some people who I felt weren't really engaging in the interview. There's the Bill Belichick moment, after he loses the Super Bowl after the perfect season. Until that game, I had that sideline and that report for the network to do that, and I wasn't rattled by OJ. The Simpson. He was a little bit imposing. He was more, contentious than intimidating, and he was very much in denial. But I do think that Mike Tyson, I was a little rattled because this is a guy we knew who could snap, and he had just gotten out of prison, and obviously bit Holyfield's ear in the ring, and so being at his house for that interview, when I upset, he was fine in the interview, and then he all of a sudden just clicked and lunged kind of towards me, and it's a good thing he was restrained. So in that flash of a moment, I thought maybe he was, if he got a hold of me, I had no chance. So, but that's really the only time. There were other moments, the earthquake World Series and the Olympic bombing, where you're just concerned about other things. But it's funny, the job, when you're in focus for the job, that's all you're really concerned about, and until other things around you affect you more closely. And so that's kind of the way I've always operated.
Chris Myers is joining us, the award-winning sportscaster. He's got a new book out, That Deserves a Wow, and so many moments from your career, Chris. And, we mentioned you've been there through so many of these tent poles of sports history and just history in and of itself. You're talking about OJ, Mike Tyson, Loma Prieta earthquake, Olympic bombing. Also, the race where Dale Earnhardt tragically passed away when you're working for Fox and covering NASCAR. Dale Earnhardt wasn't just a sports icon. He was an American icon. What do you remember from that terrible day?
Yeah, Maggie, that's interesting because it's interesting if you saw that. Think about it, he was doing his sport live. So if that happened in any other, think of an NBA, the guy top of or professional football, and on the field or in the moment on the court, for that to happen like that, it was jolting, and it was difficult. It was our first, as a broadcast, the network, our first Daytona 500, and I'd gotten to interview him a few times, even when I was at ESPN. But the hardest part, for personally for me, doing that post race show was the analysts that I was working with had all really grown up with Dale Earnhardt and had raced against him or worked with him and competed, and they were really like family to him. So for me, I saw them, and we couldn't announce right away. They knew from their experience when he hit the wall. We've seen other drivers walk away, but they could tell by the reaction of what was going on the track that his life was gone, and we couldn't announce it. And so obviously the NASCAR and the family and the hospital, he went there and stayed. So I had to kind of watch them deal with this. We couldn't tell the audience it was official, just that it looks bad, but watching them kind of crumble in grief all around me was a very difficult thing. And then having to relay to the audience as much as we could. And then once it was announced, the coverage of it, was a very difficult thing. Shocking. You go to a sporting event. That's why this is a little Forrest Gumpian in terms of the book. I got into sports for all the fun reasons that we do. And then there were quite a few of those that you mentioned that turned into bigger than life, bigger than sports news events, but you still got to cover them, and you still got to report them to people, and that's always been a unique challenge when they popped up.
I think people wonder that. They think, oh, we're in the sandbox of life. And, 90% of the time we are in the sandbox of life. But
Right.
sometimes the real stuff hits pretty hard. Chris Myers is joining us. He's got a new book, That Deserves a Wow. All right, on a lighter note, Tom Brady, first year as a broadcaster with Fox. He gets thrown into the deep end, Chris, with the #1 broadcasting crew. What do you think he can do to take the next step? Like, clearly he's got some of the basics down. He's got some of the fundamentals. He's getting better every week. To take that next step using all of your career and all the knowledge that you have, what do you think Brady can do to take, because he would want to know, he's the guy who's always improving. What can he do to take the next step?
Yeah, and that's the thing. He is a workaholic. At whatever he's doing. I know he's doing a lot of different things in retirement, but people should know, and he doesn't brag about this, and it hasn't been publicized a lot, but he's put a lot of time and energy from when he first retired into some broadcasters would, as they were playing, or I should say players, they would ease into broadcasting part-time. So he's so focused that he wanted to finish his playing career, and then during that stretch work on the broadcast part, simulated games, his own voice coach, whatever other kinds of things that, and I some of that is his information, but I know that he works at everything. We saw that in football, and he does have that perfectionist type of approach. So the biggest thing, it sounds like a coach here, but the reps, right? The more you do, and you could do simulated games, but the real games in real situations. And Kevin Burkhardt's great to work with in terms of setting him up or guiding him or letting him be him. And his knowledge is what needs to come out and in the succinct manner. So, the biggest thing probably too is sometimes, your voice has to cut through. That's the other thing I think a lot of when guys do games, if you're in the studio, people see you and your voice, you don't have to project as much, but it has to be natural. So in the game, your voice has to cut through the crowd noise. He did that when he was barking out signals, obviously, to write it on an audible to call a play. And so, but you have to kind of do that naturally, and your voice doesn't sound like you're yelling or you're being artificial. So that's probably, when I've watched the games, I do think, in fairness, he's gotten better. It's rare when you start at the top. It's like putting a rookie quarterback into a Super Bowl game and say, go. And we'll see. I think people will see once he gets to the Super Bowl in February on Fox, when he calls that game. He'll be a lot more comfortable, and you won't be thinking about, you won't be analyzing his broadcast work. You'll be analyzing his content, and I think that's what he really wants, what he actually says in the game, because I think he said some interesting things when you watch the game that go, that if anybody else says them, they're all right, but if Brady says them, you listen a little bit more.
Chris, sorry, we're up against break, but real quick, there's some personal stuff, some painful stuff in the book. What's the reaction been? You don't seem like a person who always put your life out there so easily. Has it been a bit nerve-wracking to have people read the book and really get to know you more?
Yeah, Andrew, I thought it was important if I was going to talk about interviewing other people and their lives and how they reacted to things, I had to at least address that. My family's very private. I've always been, the game is the thing, the player, the guest they're the story, and you keep it moving along. But because the loss of my son at a young age, before I went actually to the Daytona 500, the outpouring of emotion, support, people at ESPN that I'd worked with in the past, Obviously, the Bill Murray's family show. It just it's athletes, coaches, people I had never even met in the sports world that were very supportive. And I talk about the detail of that. I want people to know that if you hit a dark moment like that, something that's really tragic for you or your family, there's more help out there than you realize if you need it, and they're there, that I'll always be grateful for that, because the sports world, the media world, we're a tight group. It's an important fraternity, and you don't have to lean on each other much, but when you do, it's good to know they're there.
Chris, congratulations on the book. That deserves a wow. You can get it wherever books are sold now. It's fantastic. It's like going back through a sports chronicle, which was really from someone who was right there and had a front row seat and dictating the action to all of us. So thank you so much, and congrats.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Keep up the good work on the show. I really enjoy you guys.
Yeah. Hope to see you soon, Chris. Thank
See
you.
you, Andrew.
Appreciate you, Chris.
All right, take care. Bye.
Hope to see you in New Orleans. Okay.